The first time Margaret Holloway saw the janitor roll a bright red rubber ball across the polished lobby floor toward her daughter's wheelchair, something inside her snapped, sharp and final, like a glass thread pulled too tight. Her heart didn't pause to ask questions. It didn't wait for explanations. It only saw danger, disrespect, and a reminder of everything she had already lost. In that instant, surrounded by marble walls and corporate silence, a single decision would ripple through many lives, exposing pain, pride, and a truth so heavy it would stop an entire company in its tracks. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and the quiet good that often hides behind misunderstandings, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us why compassion still matters. Margaret was a senior operations director at a technology firm headquartered in downtown Chicago, a woman who had climbed every rung with discipline and relentless control. She wore grief the same way she wore tailored suits, pressed flat and hidden from view. Her daughter, Abigail, had been paralyzed from the chest down after a drunk driver ran a red light 2 years earlier. The accident had taken Margaret's husband, Samuel, and left Abigail bound to a wheelchair before her 10th birthday. Since then, Margaret lived in a state of constant vigilance, guarding her daughter as if the world itself were a loaded weapon. She brought Abigail to work some afternoons because the after-school care facility felt too impersonal, too careless. The office lobby became a place of waiting, watching, and quiet fear. Thomas Reed had been the janitor there for almost 8 years. Most people barely noticed him, a man with tired eyes and a gentle slowness to his movements. He worked evenings and early mornings, polishing floors, emptying trash, wiping fingerprints from glass doors. Few knew that he had once been a physical therapy assistant before life unraveled in a series of bad turns that left him caring for a disabled brother and drowning in medical debt. He never spoke of it. He simply did his job and watched people pass him by. On that afternoon, Thomas noticed Abigail sitting alone, her hands folded tightly in her lap, her gaze fixed on nothing. He noticed the way her shoulders slumped, the familiar posture of a child retreating inward. He remembered his brother at that age, the loneliness heavier than the paralysis itself. Without thinking too much, he took a small red ball from the lost and found bin he was organizing and gently rolled it across the floor toward her, not fast, not careless, just enough to draw her attention. He had learned long ago that movement, even imagined movement, could awaken something inside a child who felt trapped. Margaret saw only the ball. She saw a strange man approaching her daughter with an object rolling toward immobile legs that could not move out of the way. Her chest burned with panic and fury. Years of suppressed fear erupted in one explosive decision. She filed a formal complaint before the hour ended, citing inappropriate behavior, unsafe conduct, and unprofessional interaction. Human resources moved swiftly. By the next morning, Thomas Reed was escorted out with a box of his belongings and a termination notice he barely understood. For Thomas, the firing was devastating but not surprising. He had learned that good intentions rarely mattered in a world that judged first and listened later. He returned home to his brother Jonathan, who depended on him for everything, and tried to explain why the grocery budget would be tighter. He said nothing about the ball. He said nothing about the child in the wheelchair whose eyes had briefly lit up with curiosity before fear shut the moment down. Days passed, then weeks. Margaret noticed subtle changes in Abigail. Her daughter grew quieter, retreating into herself even more deeply. Physical therapy sessions became harder. The therapists spoke of emotional blocks, of withdrawal. One afternoon, Abigail finally broke down, her tears silent but relentless, and Margaret realized something was terribly wrong. Later that evening, a school counselor gently explained that Abigail had been looking forward to the small moment in the lobby each day when someone noticed her, when a simple game reminded her she was still seen. The guilt crept in slowly, then all at once. Margaret replayed the scene in her mind, the red ball, the janitor's careful distance, the absence of malice she had refused to consider. But pride and fear are powerful forces. She told herself she had done the right thing. She told herself protection justified everything. The truth did not surface until the company's CEO, Jonathan Pierce, returned from an extended medical leave. Jonathan was a quiet leader, respected for his integrity more than his authority. During his absence, he had undergone surgery that left him temporarily reliant on physical therapy himself. He noticed things others overlooked. When reviewing recent terminations, Thomas Reed's file stood out. Not for its content, but for its tone. Something felt incomplete. Jonathan requested more information. He spoke privately with security staff, with receptionists, with a therapist who happened to be consulting on accessibility improvements for the building. Slowly, the story took shape. The janitor had not been playing. He had been practicing a therapeutic engagement technique once used with children facing neurological trauma. He had rolled the ball not toward Abigail's legs, but toward her line of sight, encouraging tracking, imagination, connection. When Jonathan learned that Thomas had left a career in therapy to care for a disabled sibling, the weight of the decision made in haste became unbearable. He called Margaret into his office, not with anger, but with disappointment heavy enough to feel like judgment. He explained what he had learned, not as an accusation, but as a mirror. Margaret listened as the truth dismantled her certainty piece by piece. By the time the meeting ended, she was shaking, not with rage, but with regret. Margaret asked to meet Thomas. The company arranged it quietly. When she saw him again, thinner and more worn, she understood how easily she had erased his humanity. She did not offer excuses. She offered acknowledgement. She offered the truth of her fear, her grief, her blindness. Thomas listened without bitterness. He had carried heavier burdens than anger for a long time. The company reinstated Thomas with back pay and offered him a new role coordinating accessibility support and therapeutic engagement for employees and visitors with disabilities. It was a position that allowed him to use his skills fully again. But the most profound change happened outside corporate walls. Margaret invited Thomas to work with Abigail, not as an employee, but as a guide. Over time, small exercises became moments of laughter. The red ball returned, not as a threat, but as a symbol of trust rebuilt. Abigail began to smile more. She began to believe that her world could still expand, even if her body could not. Margaret changed too. She learned that protection without understanding could become another kind of harm. She learned that control could not heal grief. She learned to pause, to ask, to see people fully before judging them. The company changed as well, implementing policies that valued context over reaction, compassion over speed. If this story has touched your heart, if it reminded you of a time when misunderstanding almost stole something precious, please take a moment to like the video, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe. Your support helps stories like this reach people who need them most. As the years passed, Abigail grew stronger in ways no medical chart could measure. She spoke about studying psychology someday, about helping others feel less alone. Thomas watched her with quiet pride. Margaret watched both of them with gratitude and humility. And Jonathan Pierce often reflected on how a single red ball had revealed the deepest truth of leadership and humanity. Before this story ends, we ask you to leave a comment below. Share what kindness or second chances mean to you, or tell us how this story made you feel. Because sometimes the most awful truths are not about what someone did wrong, but about how quickly we forget to look beyond our fear. And sometimes, redemption rolls quietly across the floor, waiting for someone brave enough to see it.